Divisions within the ruling party, the African National Congress, are getting deeper in an unprecedented fashion. The tit-for-tat suspensions of senior leaders of the party witnessed last night raises fears that the party might be headed towards political obscurity. To help us analyse this further, we are now joined by Tessa Dooms, a political analyst. Tessa, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to The Full View.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Now, the events of last night, Tessa, are an indication that the party is at the pinnacle of self-destruction. Not so?
Yeah, I think the events of last night brought into full view what we've been thinking and seeing from the ANC over many years now. Its factionalism has been something that it's tried to play down. And we all know that the ANC thrives on the narrative of unity, collective responsibility. And last night we saw not only the faction playing themselves out, but playing themselves out in ways that show that the organization doesn't actually understand itself. Many people in the organization don't understand its own constitution. And you had the SG and the deputy SG and the president of the party all now putting out different views on what transpired last night, who has authority to do what, and the circumstances that this NWC that was supposed to have given a lot of clarity that has now just led to more division.
You just mentioned that there's not much understanding of what the Constitution provides. But then what does the Constitution says then with regards to, the Secretary General firing or suspending members of the ANC? Because he's quite adamant that he's using the Constitution or he's using the powers vested by the Constitution on him to suspend President Cyril Ramaphosa. What does the Constitution provide?
So the SG is the person who would communicate major decisions in the party. He's the central figure that holds the party together. And so he is the administrative head, if you would, of the party. So ordinarily, the SG would be the one who would pronounce on those kinds of things. The NEC and the NW and the National Working Group would be the ones who say, okay, this is what needs to be done, and the SG would pronounce. But of course, in the case that And we need to ask questions about what happened in that meeting on Monday, and was the SG not present in that meeting, or did he just lose the battle that he's now trying to fight in the public? Because it would make sense, it would follow logically that the Deputy Secretary General would be the one who would suspend the Secretary General himself. And that's what he's contesting. He's disputing that the DSG has the same powers as the SG does in these circumstances. It's really a very, very vague point that he's making, and it's one that doesn't have a lot of merit, especially if he was in that meeting and he knows that he's the one being acted on. It only follows logically that his deputy would be the one to take that responsibility.
Yeah, sure. And we still await clarity from the SG himself and as well as the National Executive Committee. And the fact that the NEC, Tessa, is seemingly distancing itself from the letter penned by Magashule and only saying that it will be discussed in the next NEC meeting, isn't it the clearest indication that Magashule's power and influence within the party is steadily dissipating and is incredibly isolated?
I would think that that is not as obvious as it may look. I think there's still a lot of support for the SG, and one needs to ask questions, and I don't think we've asked the question enough about what happened in Monday's meeting. How did we get to the conclusion that the SG would get suspended, and what was his views in that meeting? And I think the ANC has done very poorly about communicating the ways in which it comes to its decisions. It seems if you listen to people like Tony Yengeni and others who are speaking in defense of the SG, that there may have been some agreement that the SG should be suspended, but that the mechanisms by which to do that were not agreed upon, and now the SG is busy getting away with technicalities. At this point, all we can say is that the ANC does not seem to know how to run Luthuli House, never mind the country, and that should be a great concern to us. I've always said that it shouldn't be our concern as the rest of the country, what happens within Luthuli House. But when Luthuli House does these kind of things and distracts the country with its own political infighting, it really becomes a distraction from the main issues that this country faces, that people like the president of the party, or the president of the country, should be focusing on, rather than his duties and the factions as president of the party.
Would you construe this as a key battle in the war for control of the ANC, and that the factional balance of power is steadily tilting towards party president Cyril Ramaphosa?
It's definitely a big moment in that factional battle, and the battle for what they call the soul of the ANC. I think between now and July, when we know that the NGC is supposed to be taking place, we're going to see a lot more of this tug of war in the party for power. And as we also have heard today, that there's a lot more than just an ACE camp versus a Cyril camp. We also heard names like Lindiwe Sisulu come up. We've heard names like Didi Mabuza come up. And so it's more factious than just saying the president is now coming up and is emerging as powerful. It may be many other things that are playing themselves out. But I think it would be very, very unwise of anyone to count out Ace Magashule or even Jacob Zuma and his allies at this point in time. I think many things can still happen that have nothing to do with suspension, that can still tilt the power away from the president and towards other factions within the party and other power balances.
Do you not foresee the danger of the selective application of the step-aside rule and that it will affect certain individuals, yet a larger chunk of the leadership has been found wanting on the wrong side of the law?
Absolutely. Today I was just thinking back to the term collective responsibility and how the ANC, in using the step-aside rule, is actually abdicating this idea of collective responsibility that they've held on to for so long. Because what we must recognize is that when senior ANC leaders were doing corrupt things and have been doing corrupt things, it is the entirety of the ANC that didn't act. But also, Magashule is not wrong when he says that the actual step-aside clause does not necessarily speak to being charged. It speaks to being accused. And there are many more people who have been accused of wrongdoing, and the ANC president is not off that list. He's actually on the top of that list when it comes to things like CR17. And so it's not just a foregone conclusion that the president is in the clear. I think that that clause is very vague, and the ways in which we may even see it go to court is around this idea that it's accusation that's the issue, not being charged.
All right, Tessa Dooms, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your analysis. All right, that was a political analyst, Tessa Dooms, just commenting and reflecting on the ANC's, step-aside rule and the fallout therein. And we know that, the big story is that the party Secretary General Ace Magashule is the first casualty of this particular rule.